Today we're going to talk about a topic a lot of you have requested, which is, should I be putting salt in my coffee? And the answer is hopefully not, but maybe. To explain all this properly, we're going to have to dive a little bit, just a little bit, into some taste science to start off with. And I'll also say that for the most part, we are going to talk about sodium chloride as salt. Salt is considered one of the 5 basic tastes that are sort of a lie, but aren't. So you've got salt, sour, sweet, bitter, and umami. There are other tastes that take place in the mouth. I would argue that piquancy, like heat, is one of them, astringency is another. It's a contentious topic, I don't want to get into it too far, but salt is one of those things. And it's a very simple interaction. Your tongue has a bunch of taste receptors, taste buds on it, and what it's generally doing is detecting sodium ions crossing a membrane, and you experience saltiness. And with that, though, you also experience some synergistic effects. Generally, saltiness can amplify sweetness, for example, and it can also mitigate or reduce bitterness. Now, I learned a lot of this from a book called Tasting and Smelling by Gary Beauchamp and Linda Bartoshuk. It's still available, but it is ridiculously expensive now. I did not pay that much money, but I'll put a link to it in the description. If you find a secondhand copy cheap, I would recommend it very highly. Now, when it comes to researching salt and bitterness, one of the compounds that they often test is caffeine. Now, caffeine is quite a bitter substance. It's rare that you taste it on its own, but it does contribute to coffee's overall bitterness. But if you've drunk decaf coffee, you know that even without caffeine, coffee is still bitter. Now, thankfully, it seems that salt does impact lots of different kinds of bitterness. So salt is basically our friend. We should be putting salt in our coffee all the time then, right? Firstly, one of the pleasures of coffee is when it's good, it has the right kind of bitterness. Much like beer or chocolate, some bitterness is very pleasant when it's balanced out properly by sweetness and some acidity, and overall, it's a complex and enjoyable thing. I don't want to get rid of it any more than I want to get rid of the acidity of coffee. I want it to taste good. And we should also consider salt to be an addition. Like milk or cream or sugar, it might make the drink more palatable, but it will change it. It will obscure the truth of it in a way. Without sounding overly philosophical, it'll be harder to taste where that coffee is from and the journey that it's taken from seed to cup. Secondly, and this is very important, salt perception is not universal. What is my threshold of detection, my threshold of recognition, might be different to yours. Let's talk about actually putting some salt into coffee. Now, to start with, I have a simple example. I have a V60 that I brewed that was way too fine. It's over-extracted. I brewed it quite slowly at too fine of a grind. It will be harsh and a little bit bitter. There will be some tastes that are unpleasant in it that are not bitter tastes, things like astringency. Salt will do nothing for those. Often you'll see a recommendation that you put the salt in with the ground coffee, and that tastes better than putting it straight into the cup of coffee. Now, that didn't make much sense to me, except that if you're working at pretty low concentrations, it's probably easier to be accurate when you're scaling up. If you overdose or underdose the amount in the actual cup, that'll be a much more noticeable fluctuation than doing it across an entire litre and a half of coffee. However, in this situation, I'm going to be dosing the cups, and to do so, I have my good friend, some saline solution. This is just 20% salt, 80% water, so that I know in a gram of this, there's 0.2 grams of salt. So here's the test. I'm going to take this particular cup. I'm going to put in, to start with, half a gram of saline. I'm adding 0.1 of a gram total salt into about 200 mils of liquid. Give you a little stir. Now, this isn't a blind test, as you can tell, because I can see the coffee. Let's start with our undosed section. Not great, a little harsh. That is better, but it's actually noticeably salty to me. That's 0.1 grams of salt in 200 mils. It's really interesting. It's quite noticeable. And it is better. I think it's a little bit tastier, it's a little bit softer. It does have a touch of that saltwater mouthfeel. But thinking about this, how do you accurately dose with a teaspoon 0.1 gram of salt? You can't. It's not really doable. Now, if I was trying to dose this into the basket, I would have to presume that everything got dissolved, but I wouldn't know for sure. And at that point, I might be dosing, less than half a gram of salt into a half litre V60. So for me, this is one where you need a delicate hand. I absolutely wouldn't recommend just getting a pinch of salt and putting it in your coffee, because you could very easily end up with something too salty. To be honest, I would say an over-extracted V60 of coffee is not really an adequate endgame boss for salt to face in this one. I think we need a bigger challenge for it to overcome to really endorse it as a good idea, as a useful thing to have around. There's only one option for that. Nescafe Original. Not even Gold Blend. We're going for the basics. The basic. This would be quite a bitter product. I'm going to get a couple mugs of this brewed, and then we'll dose it with salt and see how much it takes for it to be good. And does it get to good before we get too salty? Let's find out. These smell really bad. Really bad. Let's make them better. They're made to spec. You get a spec 1.8 grams of coffee to 200 mils of water. These are exactly that each. Let's start gentle. 0.3 grams, I think, is probably about right. Now, the idea of adding salt to coffee is not new. It's common in lots of cultures. You see it often, in particular, in Scandinavian countries. They have a big history of that. You might think that's weird. The Scandinavians do the light roast thing, but that's a new thing. Historically, dark roasted coffee was everywhere. So let's get our sort of pain threshold set with a benchmark of just plain Nescafe. It's not for me. It's not for me. Oh, that is better. Even at 0.3 of a gram, that's better. I'm going to dose it up a little bit more, though. I'm going to take it up to 0.6. Wow, it's pretty magical, actually. That's pretty magical. I'm going to take it up a little bit more. Let's be clear about what this is not doing. This is mitigating bitterness. This is reducing my perception of bitterness, slightly improving the texture and mouthfeel of the coffee. The flavor is the same. It's absolutely the same. It just doesn't hurt quite as much to drink. But that is really surprising, and it's interesting. So bear in mind, in this 200 gram cup, at most I had 0.2 grams of salt in it. That's very little salt. That is a pinch, and I hate things like a pinch. I hate any volumetric measurements of anything because they're very confusing. And how much even is a pinch? Because it's going to be different if I'm using table salt to using, say, kosher salt or even molten, big, flaky sea salt. But a mass of salt is a mass of salt. It is consistent and glorious and highly recommended. Speaking of which, I would recommend making a salt solution like this with table salt, with cheap salt. It's okay if it's got a little bit of an anti-caking agent in it, but you don't want any other extras in there. You don't need raw salt, unrefined salt. You just need sodium chloride as cheaply as you can get it. So don't bother with kosher salt, don't bother with expensive fancy salts. They don't have anything extra that's going to do a better job here. You just want cheap table salt. A final word of warning, this doesn't work for everybody. For some people, the suppression of bitterness from salt doesn't particularly happen. You'll get a little effect, but not as strong as other people. So if that's you, I'm sorry, but don't be weirded out if it doesn't seem to work too much. For most people, though, it's a surprising and interesting little change. Now, I've seen people like Scott Rea recommending this on Instagram, on his kind of tip of the day, other places. It's a very old idea in lots of different countries. So why not learn about how you taste a little bit more, learn a bit more about what you like and how your sense of taste works. If you do this, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know your experiences. If you use salt all the time already, well, let me know. But if it doesn't work for you, also let me know. I'd be interested to know what percentage of people this doesn't work for. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. A lot of you had a question about this poster. It's a print we commissioned from Matt Joyce, an artist in the UK. It's available as a print and as a t-shirt. It's a limited edition thing for tens, hundreds, thousands. It's available now. There's a link in the description down below. Thank you. Hope you enjoy it.